we're going to pick up right where we left off. Looking at evidence number 3 for continental drift. This is what Alfred Wegener was using to support his hypothesis at the time. And another thing he was noticing is that where these mountain ranges seem to end and the ocean begins, well, if you fit the continents back together, the mountain range doesn't end. It actually continues on another continent. So you might have a mountain range coming up the coast of South America that seems to end and then picks right back up in Africa. And if you look today at those rocks, you'll see they're the same type of rocks. If you get an age of the rocks, you'll find that the rocks are the same age. So it seems to make perfect sense. The next piece of evidence he used was another pretty strong piece of evidence. When you have a glacier move through an area very slow, one thing it typically does is it leaves some tracks. It scratches up the rocks, it scratches up the earth. And it's pretty easy signs to tell when you can see an area where a glacier must have went through. Well, what we've noticed is there's glacial marks in areas of the world that should have never received glaciers or had ice move through if they were there throughout the history of Earth. You can find glacial marks on rocks in Africa. But if you look at Wegener's hypothesis, perhaps Africa wasn't always around the equatorial regions of the Earth. That if you look at it closely, all these areas that have glacial scarring, you can move them around and you see that as from Pangaea, those areas were actually much more distributed towards the poles where glaciers do move around and scratch up the surface. We're going to stop right here and kind of end right where Wegener was having a problem. You know, with all this evidence, why weren't other scientists jumping on board? Why were they fighting against this idea? And there may be a number of reasons. One being he was out of his field. Another maybe being that there was a lot of strife in the world back in 1918 and beyond then with World War I, World War II. But the main reason was Wegener could not give a reason. He had all the evidence to support that it happened, but continents don't just get up and move. He couldn't think of the cause for the movement. How do you move something that massive? And that evidence didn't come around, unfortunately, until after Alfred Wegener had died, which is another side story. How Alfred Wegener died is interesting in itself. He died later in life on a polar expedition, and he and a colleague were running supplies, food supplies, out to some other people and got a bit lost and ended up never being found again. At least he was, but his partner wasn't. They both froze to death. Probably Wegener himself probably died of cardiac arrest, but nonetheless was lost in the polar region, so he was in a lot of trouble. And ironically, where they buried him back when he died is probably several feet away from where it was or where it is today because of continental drift and plate tectonics.